is Antonio Moore coming from Tone Talks. I have the wonderful Yvette Carnell from Breaking Brown, Your Black World is also in the house. And we're just here to kind of have a discussion about a couple of great topics that are going on right now. One of those, of course, being what just happened out of South Carolina. Then we'll be talking about Super Tuesday and then talking about MSNBC and what happened with Melissa Harris Perry. You want to introduce yourself or say hello to the audience?
I just want to say hello, Breaking Brown fam. Hello, Your Black World fam.
Yeah. So South Carolina. I wrote an article on this topic a week before South Carolina was set to primary, and I basically did the piece where Hillary Clinton asked for Black Americans' forgiveness before she asked for our votes. And so, the next week we had Ashley Williams, who's my Facebook friend, actually do a powerful bit of protest, confronting Hillary Clinton in front of a largely white audience, which I'll pull up right now, just so you guys can kind of see the backside view, if you haven't, of who else was in this audience, and bring to Hillary's doorstep the statement and also the general reality of her background being a neoliberal, and in some senses just a straight conservative. When she said bring them to heel, which is HEEL, which is like breaking an animal. Anything you wanted to say on that in that protest they had?
I appreciated the protest for no other reason than it brought that issue back to the table. But it kind of exposed Hillary Clinton too. Like, here she is with all of these donors, right? Like 500 people paid like $500 plate to be there. And when this girl confronts her, unlike Bernie Sanders, who just kind of walks away and, gives the Black Lives Matter activists, the table, Hillary Clinton is like, you're being rude. And then, she says, nobody's ever asked me that question. And as she's being led away, like, Hillary Clinton just goes back to, business as usual. So I didn't see a lot of empathy. Like, even if you see this young person coming in here and they're protesting, I didn't see anything that wanted to empathize with that position or have a conversation. She was just like, nobody's asked me that question. You're being rude. Let's just move on. But I appreciated the fact that we brought that back to the table, because people really don't understand, or people had stopped talking about what she said about bring them to heel. We have these super predators, and how these black men have been portrayed as like these are not even regular criminals. These are super predators. They're monsters. And you heard that too when the young guy DeAndre got killed in, I think it was, what was he killed in Wisconsin? What happened was that the officer wrote in his report, I had to use my gun because he was so big and he was so much stronger than me. And the guy was like 5'7" and average weight. So this whole idea that black men are somehow, superhuman and they're a threat. You saw that with Michael Brown too. He was huge, so I had to use the gun. So you can draw a straight line from the kind of stuff that Hillary Clinton said all the way back to how black men right now are perceived, in America, and how black men, so nobody cares if black men go to jail because they're predators and they're hulkish and they're sort of monstrous figures anyway. And so I was happy that she brought that back to the table.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've really been in discussion with, and we've both been in discussion with Michelle Alexander, who wrote the New Jim Crow, about this whole subject matter, is the power of her piece in the nation, and also the reality of the economics behind incarceration. Because so often we get caught up in the first level, which is, a lot of black men went to prison, but there was an economic engine created from their incarceration. And I covered this in my own piece. If you get a chance, just check it out on Huff. Hillary Clinton should ask for forgiveness for black America, in so many words. And what I found is this excerpt from a whole piece that shows how farms were dying in the Midwest, and they didn't have economies. So their new economy became the growth industry of incarceration, by imprisoning jobs for prison guards and all kind of other secondary jobs, police officers. And so, like, through black men going to jail, you actually employed white men. And fundamentally, I think that's part of the connection and through line that so often is missed. And, one of the things that I have talked extensively with Michelle about is that dynamic, that truth, that this wasn't just about incarceration. It also was about economics. Now, I think the other thing that's real interesting is that we as a nation have not confronted who is being incarcerated. These are descendants of slavery. Like,
yeah.
They're not just black. They're not just brown. They're descendants of slavery. They're not just people of color. They're colored people. that came from slavery. So just recently they were enslaved. Post-slavery they did with peonage, where they were incarcerated for things like if we look at pig law as an example, pig law basically was a law where if you stole or got accused of stealing a white man's pig, gave you 5 years in the felony. There's not some kind of like law in the way that it's exactly the same sentence you got for 5 rocks of crack. These are not people that sit down and do the most extensive research. There's the same dynamic that's going on, the underbelly of it all. And I think the Clintons, they have not been held accountable, just like America, for the sins that have created so much devastation in Black America.
No, I agree with you, and I've heard the explanations as to why, that I have heard from other Black people. I had somebody tell me over the phone, maybe that it's possible that they didn't anticipate this. Now, the same person who told me that it was possible they didn't anticipate this told me that the Congressional Black Caucus, the members of the Congressional Black Caucus who did vote for this, should be ousted. So what you're telling me is the Clintons, who had this as an agenda item for them, are less culpable than the Congressional Black Caucus members who voted for it. Now, I'm fine with holding everybody accountable for the decision that they've made. But what you have to look at is the fact that they should be held accountable, and the idea that we should negotiate with them, that what we should do as Black people is negotiate with the people who decimated us, everything from mass incarceration to welfare, that we should negotiate with these people somehow, and that should be the proper response. And it comes from a misunderstanding. Most people don't know what you were talking about in terms of how the incarceration, how those numbers affect unemployment. So it also makes unemployment skewed. If you include, like you told me, if you would put those people back, those Black men back into society and they're unemployed, okay, then you have a different unemployment number. It skyrockets. So nobody knows.
And also for white men, because you get the increase of white men that are prison guards now are unemployed as well.
Exactly. So, but I don't think people understand how how diabolical this exploitation is, what you're talking about.
And so, even when you think about it, when you have a tax base that's decreasing, or for that matter, when you have a tax base period, there's 2 ways to get money from people. One is through love, and the other through fear. What they were doing was creating fear where there was, let me not say none, but not to the level that they were actually creating. So by calling people super predators, you make them think that these people are coming through your door tomorrow if you don't allow us to give the states money to protect you. And so that's the dynamic behind the language. It isn't just this blind language of just saying the words. And that's the reasoning behind the apology. A lot of people don't understand the political chess game of asking for an apology. They think it's about saying, oh, I'm sorry. No, when someone at this level says, I'm sorry, they got to fix that. It's now you have a foot that, you just said you're sorry for that. There's a reason why when you look at her response in the Washington Post to the gentleman that always is kind of catering to her.
K-Part?
Yeah, all right. He spoke to her, and the Post tried to do a piece that, the title was Hillary Clinton Apologized. I was on their head. I reached out to the editors, the writers, and I told them, y'all got to change this. And they changed the title to Regret, because that's what she expressed, regret. She didn't apologize, because she is calculating and understanding that she cannot say, I'm sorry for that. One, because then Black America will come back and ask you to fix what you're sorry for. That's the first part. And the second part is white America will then also look at those words and say, why are you sorry? Those people are criminals.
Yep. No, I think you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right about, how that ends up if she says you're sorry. But, the problem has been historically is Black people haven't been necessarily sophisticated enough to do anything after the apology. You know what I mean? In terms of making demands for specific policies, not just some general, this was wrong and we're going to do better, but general policies to undo what you've done. What policy are you proposing to undo the damage that you've done? And the other thing I want people to think about is this idea, some people have expressed that, well, this was the atmosphere during that time, and the Clintons were just responding to that atmosphere. And the truth of the matter is the Clintons helped create that atmosphere, and they exploited that atmosphere for political gain. They wanted those Reagan Democrats that Ronald Reagan had, and they knew they had done it. They had great pollsters who had gone into the white community, and white people were talking about how awful, not just super predators, they're talking about how they, this is the advent of reverse racism, about how everything in their life that was detrimental in their life happened because black people were getting too much. So what they did was exploit this. They exploited black people, and they made black people into be super predators. They exploited the caricature of black people as lazy with the welfare. So it's not something that was created. This is a caricature. Bill Clinton said after the riots, he didn't talk about the foundational issues. He didn't talk about poverty or anything like that. He didn't talk about anything in the black community. He said he agreed basically with the Republican Party that this is a crisis of sort of black culture, that, and that's what we keep coming again to, the same thing, that there's something wrong with black people. Like, everything comes back to there's something wrong with black people. Well, black men are predators, which kind of goes back to black people being perceived as animals and apes and all kinds of other stuff. And so this is what they did, and this is the environment that they helped create. It's not as if this thing just happened in a vacuum and the Clintons just plopped down and this is where they were. And this started in Arkansas. Arkansas had the Confederate flag and all of that, and while Clinton was president, he governed like a Republican. So I just don't understand this disconnect.
And so, like, the dynamic of how America is developing with technology is exposing the reality of regional experiences of race into a national discussion. And I think fundamentally, as we pivot into South Carolina, that's part of where our discussion is going to go. I mean, you have this context of a South Carolina that still has a slave market, slave plantations. And I'm living in LA where we had 2 riots. And I don't think that the slave market would have made it past the 90. I don't think it would have made it past Watts, but 92 riots, that would have been the first to go. And so, and that's not a disrespect to slavery. I love 12 Years a Slave. Watched Django. I watched all of Roots. Mark Wahlberg, who produced Queen, is a friend. But this is more so just a statement of, we just are, you saw what happened in Anaheim with the Ku Klux Klan. Y'all get off the van.
Yeah.
Y'all get off the van. It's just going to be problems. This is not that place. So as I look at South Carolina and look at the voting pattern, I can't relate as somebody who grew up in the heart of Los Angeles, South Central Los Angeles, Boys in the Hood. That's where I grew up. And so, like, now, when I started looking at the black vote and how it broke down, I have the AP exit poll. It says black primary voters were more likely to say they trust Clinton over Sanders. 8 in 10 of them voted for Clinton. If we look at it by gender, black men were 82% for Clinton, 18% for Sanders. Black women were 90% for Clinton, 11% for Sanders. The irony is that the white vote really split kind of down the line. White men went for Sanders at a 56 clip. White women went for Sanders at a 44 clip. White women went for Sanders at a 60 clip. White women went for Clinton at a 60 clip and went for Sanders. So it split. The white vote split down the line. What teetered this whole thing was this was the black vote. And so, like, when you know the Clintons' history, you really have to question where that comes from. And, like, when you even look further, I had another exit poll out of NBC that kind of looked at at reasoning behind it. So they asked 3 questions, the first and the second being the most important, which is, 1, generally, do you want your candidate to continue Obama's policy? 70% of these black voters are saying they want them to. I understand that, okay, to some extent. The second question is even more, like, telling. Do you want to change to more liberal policies? Only 19% of these voters, the Democratic primary, said they want to change to more liberal policies. This compares to like 5% in Nevada, 45% in New Hampshire, and so, like, you really have to look at a group that had to deal with welfare cuts, that had to deal with incarceration. I pulled out, like, they're one of the hardest hit by prison gerrymandering. The process of putting these prisons in areas that are primarily white to increase the power of the white vote. And so, like, to have a group of people so affected by the policies of the Clintons, and then to turn around and say, I know the Clintons is why I voted for them, do you understand that they're the part of the reason that your lives are so bad,
Yeah, I don't think, excuse me, but I don't think they have made that connection. Like, I don't think that these people, and people get offended when you say, well, Well, who is the Bernie? The Bernie guys are trying to tell us that we don't understand politics. Well, you have to question whether or not you do. You have to question our political sophistication when we don't understand that having more liberal or more leftist policies actually do benefit black people who are disproportionately poor and disproportionately impacted by mass incarceration, disproportionately impacted by welfare cuts. So maybe you really don't understand. Maybe what we really do need here is a political education. And a lot of what I fought here is the black establishment, right? Because after Michelle Alexander came out with her piece about Hillary Clinton, and it was very critical of Hillary Clinton, what you saw was Hillary Clinton call in all of her cards. She called in all of her black people and said, it's time to get to work. It's time to put in work. And that's what I saw. And when you talk about a difference in the South and where you grew up, the one thing you have to understand is that the church is real big in the South.
Well, pause for a second. I didn't say the South. I'm looking at South Carolina.
Okay.
Because as we go to the 12 states, if you look at Georgia, it's split in differently than South. South Carolina is not the barometer of black America.
No, South Carolina is maybe be the barometer of Alabama. You know what I mean? Maybe the barometer of Mississippi, maybe. But the infrastructure, the black establishment infrastructure there. You have the church is very important. You have people like the mayor of Columbia, who is very important in terms of that black establishment infrastructure, right? And all of those people went out very hard for Hillary Clinton. You had even black people from here, like you had John Lewis come out and just kind of, right before the primary, just before the South Carolina primary, just start throwing daggers. You had him say he even said some Republican stuff. Remember what he said? Well, nothing's free in America. There's no free healthcare. You got to pay for food. You got to pay for water. That's a Republican line. And the truth of the matter is there is something free in America. There was free slave labor for a number of years. Banks got bailed out. If you want to put up a business and you are a big company, you get the hookup. You get all kind of tax rebates to the point to where you're doing business for free.
I even go further. You look at the farm, you get paid for being a bad farmer.
Yes.
Through the subsidy. And so, it's funny because I hate talking in conjecture. I either talk in facts or in straight data because people love to take conjecture and be like, that's an opinion. I'm going to read a little section from you. This is the South Carolina mayor in 1998, 2 years after Bill Clinton's Welfare Reform Act. This is 2 years after. He says this in his State of the Union to all of his people, and this is what he's telling. He says, and tonight I am pleased to report that South Carolina's welfare rolls have been cut nearly in half. Elaine King and Angela Dinkins are two examples whose success stories were reported in Wall Street Journal. After years on welfare, these women completed a rigorous program called Bright Futures, which transitions welfare clients to be correctional officers. To be correctional officers. That is a job training.
Yeah.
So that is what you're voting for.
Yeah.
That is what, and so I think in so many ways, one of the things that I really was caught off on with South Carolina when I look at it is things like, and I want to read I read this Yahoo article that just, I sent it to you earlier, and I just ended up having to post it on Facebook, but there's a young guy named J.A. Moore that gets interviewed the day after election in South Carolina. He didn't grow up in Charleston, but he moved there.
Uh-huh.
And so what he said is, this is the exact section. J.A. Moore is a 30-year-old African-American South Carolina native who served as vice chair of the Charleston County Democratic Party. This is his quote. Me not being from Charleston, they call me a cum-ya. And people that are from here, they call them a bin-ya. Moore said using phrases from the local Geechee dialect. I think a lot of times people look at Secretary Clinton as someone that's been here before. They've seen her, they recognize her, they have a certain level of comfort with her because they know her. I think with Senator Sanders, he's a cum-ya. And so, what you see is that black people are approaching national level presidential elections, like beauty contests at the local high school. It's about personal, how you build friendships. Like the alderman or something of the sort. No, you put the person on their platform and their history, not based on how much they can sing or whether they said your sweet potato pie is good. And I think that's getting missed. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's how we judged the Clintons the first time. It was all about familiarity, right? you know, Bill Clinton came down, and you know, there's this book, I can't remember now off the top of my head, but there's this book where a bunch of black people, black members of the black elite, you know, talked about from mayors to governors to thought leaders to academics to reporters, and they talked about Bill Clinton, and they said Bill, you know, basically the whole book boiled down to Bill Clinton acted like he liked us, and that was enough. The fact that he came into the room and didn't act like a racist, and he didn't act like he was afraid to shake our hands, and he didn't act like he didn't want to be a bother with no Negroes, like that was enough for us to say he's our guy. And so we didn't pay attention to, like, what are his policies? What are your policy recommendations? Like, what are you going to do for us? And then we started even signaling, you know, the orchestrated attacks on Jesse Jackson, Sister Soldier, all that kind of stuff, the stuff that happened with Lonnie Guinier, all that stuff that went down. We was just like, yeah, you know, he got to do that. He got to get elected. And we do that all the time. And so you see us doing that same thing with Clinton now. Clinton knows us. She's been here. She was married to Bill. She might have made some mistakes, but it's over. So everything with us is about familiarity. And to me, that's just, you know, and I get in trouble when I say this, but that's just an unsophisticated way to approach politics. You're not going to get anything but used if that's how you approach political conversations.
No, I always, like I said, I totally agree with the points that you make, and I always try to bring it back to the specific, because, you know, people are watching this, and I know that sometimes, you know, you're not from, say, South Carolina, so, like, you don't know how this all breaks out, and how it actually shows up in the actual day-to-day life. So I pulled another article from a site called prisonpolicy.org, and they did an analysis of something called prison gerrymandering. Now, I mentioned it earlier, but what it is a form of gerrymandering where you increase the power of certain people's votes. So, you know, one town has one city has a lot of people, a town has not enough people for a legislature. Like, say they only have 75 people and they need 100 for a legislator. What you do for prison gerrymandering is you build a prison in that town. You incarcerate people from the city. So let's say you incarcerated 125 people from the city, but you put them in the jail in the town. Now there's 200 people in this town. Now they can get 2 legislators, because it takes 100 people to get a legislator based on the numbers I'm giving. But the only people voting are the 75 people. Now the other issue is these 75 people, using adding the dynamics, are all white, and it's their interest to keep the prison open. So they're voting against the interests of the people in the prison, but using their voting. So they count, these prisoners count like people in terms of how you assess how many people you have, but they can't vote to actually use their vote. So in Richland County, 7th county council district, drawn after the 2000 census, it reached this required population of 29,152 by including, this is in South Carolina, by including almost 5,000 people incarcerated in state and county correctional facilities, as if they were residents of the district. Padding the district in this way gave every group of 92 residents in the district as much influence over county affairs as 100 residents in another district. This is the dynamic of what the Clintons brought to South Carolina. And so, like, when you say you know him, the question becomes, do you really know his policies? And do you really know how, you know, so often what I'm hearing is how can you blame Hillary for Bill's mistake? She's not even making that argument.
No.
Like, she knows, like fundamentally, this Secretary of State, this senator thing has been in play a long time. She was not just a first lady. She was a partner in this. And I respect that. You know, I totally get it. But, like, for somebody on the outside to not make an argument that she herself isn't making, that doesn't even make sense, just to justify why this all happened, so that you don't have to answer, it's just blatantly ignorant.
Well, there's I think it's in Jacobin, where, you know, where there's a quote from her in terms of the welfare bill, talking about how it wasn't a perfect bill, but it was a good bill, and how she actually called around, you know, to get votes for the bill. So this whole idea of Hillary Clinton, you can't have it both ways, right? You can't say you can't right now say I was just first lady, and she's not saying that. But the people who are supporting her can't say, well, she was just first lady, you know, knowing that she left that job. After she was done being first lady, she was a senator. If she had been just first lady, You wouldn't have rose up like that. And if you are saying she rose up like that, then you're basically saying, well, she rose up off her husband. How's that for a feminist ideal? So Hillary Clinton isn't saying any of that. So anybody who says that obviously is just trying to cape for Hillary Clinton, or they just don't understand the power relationship that these two people have. You won't find any biographer of the Clintons who says that Hillary Clinton was just a first lady. Nobody would say that. Like, nobody who lived through healthcare and lived with her in the White House, during that time and knew anything about politics or had proximity to power during that time would ever make that claim. This is just, again, people who, I'm sorry to say, these are people who say these are people who really don't read books. These are people who aren't reading books and aren't reading articles and are just trying to find a way to kind of undergird arguments against the Clintons for reasons that I can't even figure out.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, I think fundamentally the very irony of Hillary, and I was just talking to a judge that I work with who's a white female, is how she cuts under the idea of white women as minorities. I mean, fundamentally, here you have it. I mean, she's running as the first female president on the legacy of her husband, and saying at the same time that I'm going to be first, and that's why you beat both of me. But so it's like this dynamic where, and then when we look at the bad parts of that legacy, it's like, I'm not part of that. She's not saying that, but that as a society, she's not part of this white male dominance that subjected so many blacks to such devastation. So it's like, fundamentally, it's just like you're getting all parts of the cake, all the good parts of the cake. You have struggle, you weren't part of the struggle, even though you was right there, right in the struggle. And so, like, no, it just didn't happen that way. And you can't separate out the reality of her truth, like role in this thing. And I think it's very hard from the outside looking at white women to swallow that pill. Because for so long, when I say so long, I mean my lifetime and yours, we placed white womanness right next to black maleness, or let me say blackness as a whole. This brings to the forefront the dynamic of why Obama might have won in LA, that blackness precedes white femaleness, because there was slavery in this country. No matter how much we try to change that, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, it's one of those things to where this is the problem with, saying, well, minorities, which means everybody except white men. And so we don't differentiate, and it's funny, excuse me, but it's funny because, whenever there's a challenge at the Supreme Court about affirmative action, white women benefit from affirmative action, but you don't see them up there beside Jesse Jackson, So they're perfectly happy to take the benefits of it. And then when it's time to fight, kind of walk away. Like that's what a lot of people do. Like a lot of people benefit from stuff that was, written into law during a time, written into law specifically kind of to help African Americans out. But a lot of people get a part of it, whatever. But when it's time to like fight, they're nowhere to be found. And white women have benefited, like the whole argument about not making as much of a man. It's just like this is not. I'm not going to argue with any white woman that says she shouldn't make as much as a white man, but like this is not really our argument. Like all black people, the majority of black people are working class people. Like we're trying to get people out of poverty. We're not saying that Wanda over here needs to make as much as Mr. Smith, this white guy over here. We're saying, Wanda needs access to capital. She needs jobs. She has nothing in compared to what you all have. So this whole thing of, well, I'm a minority, women don't make as much as men, so I'm just like you. And people try to shame you for making the comparison. Well, why are you trying to divide us up? It's not about dividing anything up. Like the conditions are different. Like you don't want to recognize, where these things diverge, and I'm trying to explain that.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And so as we move forward, what I wanted to do is kind of break down the discussion on South Carolina as we pivot out of that, moving to Super Tuesday, and then moving to the last section. So when you look at South Carolina, I kind of look at this new discussion that we've never had in black, well, let me not say never, we haven't had in a long time, of divisions, nuanced divisions in black America. We've always said, we're not all the same, we're not a uniform group, but like looking at how age 1, gender 2, region 3, like region of the country that you're in, and then 4, of course, class, which you alluded to earlier. So starting off with age, what you're seeing is a big divide between, the BLM crowd and the NAACP and Urban League crowd. You're seeing a big divide between young Black America, that really dealt with growing up in the consequence of mass incarceration, and older Black America that really benefited from so much of the affirmative action like movement and post-civil rights, really at a hand in terms of not only supporting like Clintons, but supporting a neoliberal kind of message, and everything's just gonna work out if we just like kind of like just go with the flow. And I really looked at that. That's what Ashley Williams represents, confronting Hillary that way. We haven't seen that since the Panthers. Really, we've been really kind of like inept in terms of how we approach things in terms of politics. And then, so what do you think about the whole age element?
Well, I don't even think that, the age of the millennials came out in the most large numbers for Bernie Sanders. Yes. I think younger people kind of understand one thing, that, and this is something that I have a problem with when people tell me, this is not about class, this is about race. And one thing that I always want to tell people is race manifests as class. That's the deal. Like, Black people are underclass in this society because of race. Like, this is race manifests as class. So don't tell me like, it's not about class. Yes, it is. You wouldn't be part of the underclass if you were a white man. You know what I mean? So or you would have a much better opportunity of escaping from that class if you were a white man. If you were a white man born in poverty, you would have a much better chance probably of escaping out of that. So I think they have a kind of better understanding of the way, class and race kind of intersect. But and this is the thing with Bernie Sanders. These people, these older people, what they want, these establishment politicians, this Black misleadership class, they want access. They want to be brokers for Black people. That's how they get their money. That's their hustle. That's what they've been doing forever. They don't know how to do anything else. And if you get with Bernie Sanders doesn't even like talking about race. He likes talking about class. He likes talking about income inequality. I don't think he really wants to hear that, somebody looked at you and somebody called you a name. Now, I'm not saying I'm not speaking about that one way or the other. But what I'm saying is that there's no place for these people if Bernie Sanders is president. There's no place for a race hustler. I mean, there's no place for a Michael Eric Dyson. There's no place for Al Sharpton. There's no place for none of these politicians. If he doesn't need, he's not looking for a conduit to Black people or a middleman to Black people or a hustler who can go out and make his case to Black people. So these people know that if like a person who is just talking about class gets in there, like, you're finished.
That's great. All right. Yeah, man. And so I do agree. I mean, I get it. I'm looking at class and I'm looking at celebrities and also politicians, those two groups. And like we saw a lot of celebrities go down support Hillary. I just don't know if they know like Hillary's background. See, I'm not saying that they aren't educated. I just, I don't think that it was really taught. Like, it's funny because the way that we're taught history is we spend so much history talking about like 1800s and 1920s, like in general history class. They don't talk about bills in Congress like in the last 10, 15 years in a lot of history books. No. And so, a lot of people don't know, and let alone if they talked about it, they're not going to talk about it and really be honest about the impact on, say, like Black America, and say, like, it's just a textbook for the whole nation. So Colorado, they got the same textbook as in South Central Los Angeles, and like maybe the kids in South Central Los Angeles need to know how Bill Clinton's policies affected them in a way that Colorado people don't. Mm-hmm. And so, like, when I look at it, what you're ending up with is there's a hardening of a two-generation class of Black politicians and also now Black celebrities. I mean, a lot of the NBA stars are second gens now. You're looking at celebrities; they're also second gens. And so, like, what you're seeing is this class that has an interest that doesn't align necessarily with the general Black American interest. As I've pointed out to you a number of times, the middle Black family, no matter how you guys want to play with it, I did a piece on inequality.org, middle Black families worth $1,700. I don't think that, I don't think that too many Black celebrities relate to somebody that's worth $1,700. Especially if you can make $1,700 literally, like, just making a phone call, can you relate to somebody who that's their work?
Yeah, no.
That's their whole work.
No.
And so, like, that's the middle Black family. There's 14 million homes. That's not people, though. That's 3 or 4 Black people that are worth $1,700 together. And so, like, I look at how, without pivoting out of this, I look at how the Oscars even showed it. Oscars So White, and I looked at how Chris Rock did it, and you could just see the difference. He did the skit in front of the Compton Theater, and the skit he did with black people coming out of that theater, particularly with the young lady with the lady with the purple hair. It was really like this class issue there that I saw, where it's like making fun of these memes that news reporters catch very, very quote unquote funny acting black people, saying things that are kind of wild, and it just was cute for this white crowd, and Chris Rock was the conduit for that. And that's kind of like the same thing we see here, you know what I'm saying?
No, I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And then, I guess I'm going to talk about gender just a little bit, even though in South Carolina the vote kind of split kind of evenly, which nationally you're seeing something different, like black women are compelling Hillary in a wholly different level than black men. And it really brought to mind the question of, do you feel, let me ask you, because I have my own answer, is incarceration a black issue, or is it a young black male issue? I mean, I understand.
I think in terms of the numbers, I think it's a young black male issue, but I think it's an issue that black people care about mainly. But here's the distinction for me. I think most of the black people who are affected by crime or affected by mass incarceration are poor black people. The people who are being put in cages are mostly poor black men. So the only community the community that is mostly, not only, there are middle class and black people who get caught up in stuff, but the class that is most affected by this, if you look at the black men who've been killed, you look at Mike Brown, if you look at Laquan McDonald, you look at all they're poor black men. So I think this is an issue for poor black people. But what I'm finding is that elite black people, when you look at the black men's leadership class and others, elite black people really don't necessarily care about poor black people like that. They use poor black people to like leverage them, as for leverage in terms of the deals that they want to cut. But, John Lewis isn't being racially profiled. He went through that years and years ago. He went through the civil rights movement, but right now he's good. The black people who a lot of the black people who go to, and I see this when I talk to people, even when I talk to people who went to good schools and black people who are doing well for themselves, like this is an issue that they have access to in terms of the TV and in terms of what they hear, and they can behave somewhat sympathetic. But this is an issue that they have hands-on, experience with.
I get it, and with the George Davis killing, it really brought that to the head, because you had this young kid who was a different narrative. Mm-hmm. He had the two parents, but then at the same time, from an actual visual standpoint, albeit whether it's hip hop or whatever, he projected. Yeah, projected class level.
Yep.
And that's not at all. I don't think that anything at all was correct or warranted or anything like that. But it goes back to like even. One of the things that's happening for the black leadership class is their children are now falling in line and drawing a division line. I talked to one gentleman who told me about LA and how LA like kind of shows this framework of difference between 1980 black people and 1990s black people, especially like mid 90s, late 90s when hip hop really started taking off, and like you wanted to look like a millionaire and you wanted to look like a hip hop artist. But in 1980, wasn't nobody trying to look like cornrows. In 1980, cornrows. Like, nah, for real, like 81, 82, cornrows meant like you had a hard life, you're in prison, you're not trying to wear that. And then like, if you're trying to look like you go to college, you probably gonna look like you go to college, have a little sweater with the arms cut or whatever, and the little tie, even if you're walking in the ghetto. I'm not, you're marking yourself as, I'm not of that other class. But after, the 90s, the mid 90s, particularly what you started to see is this cross melding, and we've gotten all the way to Drake now, where you come from Canada, now you hood in America. So you saw this cross melding where you can't tell the difference, and that's really, I think, where this class of black people feel it the most. It's like, now you have to look like the young men that went to prison, and so like you deal with the consequences of people thinking you stole stuff. But if you're not having a differentiator, that you're not one of those other.
Well, see that, and that's the thing. Like the reason the black elite get caught up in this is because, I look like you, so and we're both listening to the same hip hop music, so we're both in terms of fashion, we're both doing the same thing. So I have to take care of you to a certain extent, or I'm going to act like I'm going to at least give mouth service to this, whether or not I care, because I have a grandson who looks like you. Now, he comes from a good family. He has a grandfather who's a congressman. He has a mother who's, on the school board or whatever. But he projects that hood stuff, and so he could get in trouble. So the extent to which some people in the misleadership class, are concerned about this has to do with the effect that these poor the way you can't differentiate that anymore especially amongst young millennials. Like they're gonna wear a hoodie. They're gonna do their thing. They're gonna wear a hat. They might turn it, whatever. You're gonna think this dude is just like some dude off the street. This dude came from the hood. No, he came from the neighborhood. He came from around the corner from you.
And it's funny because like LA has so much of that, because for anybody that's been here, the way it's designed is Crenshaw lies at the basin of the richest black neighborhood in America due to the property prices here, which is Ladera Heights. And so like, as you move into Ladera, you have so many blacks that are coming from, families who, because of real estate primarily, might be worth $1 million, not to mention secondary real estate. And then like they literally, have this affinity towards hip hop and everything else. Not to mention they're not far away. Like in some areas, some parts of the country, the wealthy people are like a distance away, so it's like you don't have that association. Because you can go to the Baldwin Hills Mall, or maybe this summer school at Crenshaw High School, you feel an association. And so, the last thing about this little section before we go to Super Tuesday and move on, is the region. And we talked about it briefly earlier. And like, it's just my feeling that South Carolina is not a proper like barometer for black people, and it's really questionable. It started, it has a long history, but I mean the black vote and the idea of how black people are going to vote starting in South Carolina, given the reality of plantation tours and slave march, and so like it feels like as a result of like the section I read earlier, there's kind of like this affinity towards Clinton's. My great aunt was talking to me earlier, and she said, you have to understand, this is my great aunt, it's from deep south Brooksville, Mississippi, and she says to me, black people have never had a choice other than voting for a white person before Barack Obama. And so, like, fundamentally, like, really dissecting that and understanding a legacy of voting between what you perceive as two bad options, And so, like, it makes you wonder, are they able to digest there's a better option? Like, are they really able to digest that because they've been voting in such a nuanced, specific way so long,
Yeah, I think part of what happens here, though, is that you have black politicians who are brokering and who are telling these people. I mean, it's kind of hard to look at it and be like, no, when every black person who an elected official here is telling me that this person is bad, it's kind of hard to look and be like, no, I think all of you are wrong. We tend to trust. I think there's too much trust of surrogates. Like, there's too much trust of these people. These people have something to gain from a Clinton presidency. They have nothing to gain from a Sanders presidency. Sanders is not going to promise them anything. And I would bet you if I was behind closed doors with the politicians and Hillary Clinton, she's promised them everything. So you have to look at it and see, like, these people are not for me. Like, these people have something to gain in and of themselves. I don't have to listen to what they say. Let me look at the Sanders policy platforms and what he says and think about how it benefits me. I don't think we're there yet. I think we still kind of depend on, our surrogates to kind of, give us a cue in terms of which way to go.
No, I totally agree. And like, particularly when you talk about like the deep South and the culture of the South, coming from Los Angeles again, we're a little bit different. We're of a different mindset because our city doesn't have the number of blacks and for a number of other reasons. But
compare that to Trump. Compare that to Trump. I mean, the Republicans have rejected the establishment totally, and they can't even get traction for their candidates over there. You had a governor in Kasich, and they couldn't even get traction. They have, whereas we like, okay, well, we're gonna listen to our surrogates. Republicans are like, screw the establishment, screw the RNC, screw everybody. And even though they're making all the wrong choices, they've decided to mount their own insurgency.
No. And it's funny because it started with the Tea Party and kind of proceeded out of that. And I think that the interesting part of what Black America kind of did is they took the first steps towards that kind of like energy, and then they kind of like backed off of it. like this was the moment. Like in so many ways, as we switch over to Super Tuesday, that I don't think we really grasped like this isn't going to be a national discussion for long. Like Hillary once she pivots past this, gets the nomination, she's swinging to the middle, and she's going to pander to middle white America. Because like your issues won't be relevant anymore. We'll talk about Melissa Harris Perry and the Persian of Negroes over at the MSNBC station, but like you're just seeing this pivot, and I think that Black America doesn't really get that you have to demand things for your vote. You know?
No, I don't think we don't understand, and this is all I have to say about it. We don't seem to understand that voting is an exchange. Like it's a transaction. You get something, you give me policy. You promise me policy. We make a deal. And then I get that policy, you know? So that's what it is. This idea that you vote for somebody and hope. Like you vote for somebody and hope is going to be okay. And I remember when the Tea Party were taking out Republicans like left and right a few years ago. Like they were just like, no, you're going to do stuff. You're going to give us what we want. And so what you saw is that the Republican Party went to the right to the detriment of the country. But that's what you saw. Like they had to make concessions to these people. Like nobody has to make concessions to Black people because we're not going to take anybody out. We're just going to vote again for the same people and hope for the best. Like that's our idea of politics. Hoping and voting and hoping. Like that's what we do. And like that doesn't work.
So yeah. So now as we're looking at Super Tuesday, everybody's predicting Hillary Clinton in a landslide. Hillary Clinton's going to have this great Super Tuesday, which I could definitely see. I mean, the numbers are laying out, just kind of going over the states. They got Alabama at 53 electoral, and it looks like for sure win for Clinton. This is all. They got Arkansas, which is of course Clinton land. So 32 to Clinton. Got Colorado. Looks like that might swing towards Sanders, but it's kind of like on the fence. You got Georgia, and then they said that Sanders is drawing huge crowds at his Georgia rallies, which is since the popular Atlanta-based rapper Killer Mike, but we'll see how that goes. Georgia's up for grabs with 102. Massachusetts is a must-win state, they saying, for Sanders. He needs to run up some score in some of these right liberal states. Minnesota, they're saying, is another good state for Sanders. Oklahoma, Sanders trying to steal there. A vote there. Tennessee, they're saying is safely in Clinton's column. Texas, Clinton is headed for a huge victory in Texas, and that's 222 votes. Vermont, of course, Sanders is going to win today. And Virginia, they're saying that Clinton has a huge lead. And that's kind of the breakdown of Super Tuesday. And you just have to wonder after Super Tuesday. I mean, it was kind of rigged for Sanders even after the election before South Carolina. Because coming out of that, I mean, here you have a guy who basically ran a great campaign, but super delegates kind of rigged it.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, they should have. I feel like the super delegates at worst should have waited to actually submit their votes until the people spoke more.
Mm-hmm.
At worst, at best, they should have spoken with their own people and not have super delegates. But at worst, to say. After when they're at 51, I think it was like 51-52 between Hillary in terms of like people voting, and then all of a sudden she had 450 more super delegates, and he had 0, and that's what drove her to 500. And it's like you're basically telling the rest of the states that she's going to win, and you have to vote for her because you know if you vote for him, you're wasting your vote.
Yeah,
so
pretty
like
much.
You're rigging the election. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what do you think about Super Tuesday? What do you think about what I just said?
I mean, unfortunately, I think it's over after Super Tuesday, right? I mean, I think they'll want to keep her. I think they'll want to keep Sanders around for a while. You know, he'll stick around for a while because he has a base of people who don't want to see him throw in the towel. But if things go the way they're looking to go, like Super Tuesday is the end for Sanders, even though he won't give up at that moment. You know what I mean? So, I hope that he would have a stronger showing in South Carolina. And what I would hope for on Super Tuesday, he has a good enough showing to at least kind of allow us to continue having these conversations. Because nobody was talking about class before Sanders. Like we weren't even talking about anything the Clintons had done. You know, I mentioned this in another video, but at the beginning of her campaign, she wouldn't even say Black Lives Matter. Like the fact that she had to do all this was because of who she was up against. She was up against like a New Deal Democrat, really, not some radical socialist.
I think that was part of the whole thing. I think another part of it was we have Alexander from the piece she did in The Nation, because having the clout she has as a result of the new Jim Crow and being a New York Times bestseller, her writing that scathing piece really framed it for people. I tried to follow it up and just provide that support where it's just like, this is just the facts of what happened. You look at welfare, you look at the Telecom Act of '96. I mean, we had no. It's like they cut black people's hands off and then they cut their tongue off, meaning the Clintons. Cut their hands off with the '94 Justice Bill, cut their tongue off with the Telecom Act, so they can't even talk about it. I mean, we had black radio before the Clintons.
Yeah.
When they signed the Telecom Act, basically it opens the flood doors for your Clear Channel, your radio wants to come in and buy up all the stations. And people will say, well, black people chose to sell to them, and you don't know the dynamics between the pressure that was put on those stations. But that's Super Tuesday. I'm hoping that everybody gets out in these states and at least puts their vote in. There's a lot of people that died before us for us to be able to take part in this process. And this is an important election and an important time for us to let our voice be known. And then so the last section that I just kind of wanted to touch on, you've touched on it. You're a quasi-expert on it. It's Melissa Harris Perry and the battle with NBC. I call it a battle, but it's more like, slaughter by NBC. And so, you call her a Negro whisperer, and her and so many other black people who charm Negroes in the certain aspects. And like me and you talked even about her background and just the interesting dynamic of her background, not even being that quote unquote black. And so, what is your takeaway from now Melissa Harris Perry is and also Sharp Fin, how MSNBC is handling this transition out of the Obama era?
Well, I can understand. I can definitely understand why a lot of people, Melissa Harris Perry, for a lot of people, had a very, effective validating black people, because we didn't have our black PhDs and academics on TV, before, but we always complained about not being on the Sunday show. So I understand why for some people that was important. But I just took a different view. For me, and the reasons I said Negro whisperer, was because I understood that these people had been brought on to explain blackness and to explain a black president to MSNBC's, center or center left audience. And from that perspective, there was no future for them after that was over. The network will now pivot in the direction of whoever's going to be the next president. If it's Donald Trump, you're going to see more white men. You're going to see it go conservative a little bit. If it's Hillary Clinton, we already got Rachel Maddow, and she fits very good into that centrist Democrat role. So my whole thing is, I don't understand how Melissa Harris Perry didn't see this coming. I mean, her colleagues had already left, and it was unfortunate. Because I don't think, some people say, well, this was concocted to try to get her money. Her contract was going to be up. She was going to get her money. Anyway, and now you're having to negotiate severance. They say now she's negotiating severance. Well, you were going to get your money anyway. Now you're forced to negotiate, and you might not even get, all of what was coming to you. I think Melissa Harris Perry was humiliated. I think when they brought in this guy from the Ted Cruz campaign, who even Ted Cruz called him a liar. And they brought this guy on, and he was, and she knows they're planning to let him to cover politics, and she hasn't even been allowed to cover the primaries. I think she went off, but for me, that just wasn't a smart move in terms of what to do. And even when you look back, I don't have the same view of Melissa Harris Perry that other people do, because I think people are overlooking certain damaging aspects of her show in the way she kind of explained the way. How detrimental a lot of Obama's policies were to working class black people. And this is the same person that kind of made a name for themselves in the nation by basically putting daggers in Carnell West and Tavis Smiley by calling them the Soul Patrol and all that kind of stuff, and saying that Barack Obama was the future of black people. This is the future of black politics. And I think I even went for it, and I was like, maybe she's right. I even went for it then. She wrote a very convincing piece. But when you look at what that did, Carnell West and Tavis Smiley, and I'm not saying I don't have criticism of them, I do. But in terms of people who were making a case against Obama's policy, they were the only game in town. They were the only game in town. They came early and they tried to make a case. and she basically caricatured them as like antiquated buffoons, and used that to get leverage for MSNBC to give her a show. And she still never challenged, she still never strongly challenged any of what Barack Obama was doing. So when you look at how black people kind of remained asleep during this whole time, and black people kind of never really pushed back, and you had black people saying stuff like, Obama's going to hook us up in the second term, we're going to get ours in the second term. Like, so much of that comes from black people, like at MSNBC, who had places where they could spew that to thousands of black people every day, millions even, depending on what you had Al Sharpton saying the same thing. Al Sharpton, there's a video of Al Sharpton basically just saying Obama talking points, just repeating Obama talking points, almost verbatim. You had Melissa Harris Perry doing that to a certain extent. It was a little more highbrow, of course, than the Al Sharpton, but they were reaching different demographics. She was projecting to liberal whites and to black upper class people. Al Sharpton was projecting to people who were of slightly lower class rank. But still, this is what we had. And I think these people bear some of the blame when you look at the fact that black people, Obama's leaving and we didn't get anything. And a lot of what happened during his administration was detrimental to us. And so I think I place some of the blame on her shoulders for how that happened. And I think a lot of people are not doing that. They're just looking at it as, well, they ousted Melissa Harris Perry. And I don't even see how what they did was so wrong. Well, I mean, in terms of an employment sense, they don't have to have you cover this, and that wasn't their intention anyway. The reason you were brought in to cover the primaries and cover this other stuff is because Barack Obama was still in play. As long as Barack Obama was in play, you were going to be there to cover it because that was your job. They didn't bring you in. I don't care about your political science degree. I understand you have a PhD. I understand that. These people don't care. Like, that's not why you were there. Like, when Barack Obama is gone, they don't want these black people, and you're redundant. They don't need a bunch of black people. If they're going to keep black reporters on. I think that's probably why you still see Joanne Reed. They're going to keep reporters. They don't want you pontificating about blackness and everything. They don't want to hear about blackness no more.
And I think that the interesting part about it being a black person, and I'm not one to judge people's blackness, but when you grow up in certain aspects and you can do your own research on their background, it's like, I don't want to hear you talk about blackness neither. So if the black people don't want to hear from you, and the white people don't want to hear from you, who want to hear from you? And so I'm coming back to this concept of Negro whisperer, and for you not to see the tea leaves, that this was about to happen. I don't know if you could forecast much of anything, because this is just obvious. You look at it over a timeline. Let me just say this. I didn't watch a show a whole bunch. I tried to watch 2 episodes, got through 5 or 10 minutes. But in a lot of ways, I can see why they don't want to hear from me. And so, when the whole scattered kind of I'm going to scream at my audience member or my guest, because they don't agree with me. There's no place for that in an election cycle. In a real way, I mean, I think that, I watched this one section, I'm going to pull it up right now, about her speaking, I'll send it to you, her speaking about hard work. And she basically tried to say that white people don't work hard. And she said that I have this picture on the wall of a slave picking cotton. That's hard work. What white people do today is not hard work. And they don't have time for that in the election cycle. They don't have time for you to talk about Trump every time. They just don't have time for it. And so, they ask you, just report the news and just sit there and be the face. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay.
Okay. And Obama's not in play anymore. If Obama was up for re-election, or we were going to a congressional election or whatever, where Obama was still going to be president, he's a lame duck now. That's the way the game is played. If I had been Melissa Harris Perry friend, I would say, keep your get your check and just sit down and navigate what you're going to do after this. That's all you can do. There's no reason to send an email and talk about how you're not the mammy and all that kind of stuff. That's just there's no need for that. That's not professional. That's not. And I know you send it to your staff, but how do you send something to your staff and and not expect it to get out? And you're saying all of this stuff, and it's just why are you saying this? If they're going to get rid of you, this is their stuff. Plan you up. If you're getting paid to do nothing, because if they're not really having your show on, and they're not really bringing on you to talk about politics. Okay, I'll get paid to do nothing, and because I know I know how the beast works. This is capitalism. When they don't need you anymore, they spit you out. So just plan your next move and get your check.
And that's why ownership is so important. I had like a 30-minute conversation with a friend of mine, Byron Allen. You know, he's now worth like $1 billion doing, you know, owns one of the only black man in America that can greenlight a movie. He bid $20 million on this Nat Turner movie, more than Fox Searchlight did. You can do your own research and articles on Deadline. He's also sued Comcast and Shark for basically. He's saying they paid off Shark to quiet Black America down, and then Comcast doesn't want to do business with 100% Black-owned media. And this is why, when you get in those positions, you support the people like Byron Allen, so you have somewhere to go when this moment happens. Yeah. And I'm not saying this is why, playing the short game gets you burnt. Because you play the short game, and then you burn the other people, and now, you don't have those relationships. That's why we build up our own. People that own stuff, our own people. And I think that, a lot of people try to paint Byron into a similar corner that you saw with Carnell West and with Tavis, a little different on the economic level. And in the end, you're talking about a guy who's worth $1 billion. And you're talking about a guy who's legitimately speaking about things that you might not have any experience with. So whereas, I was reading one statement, she hadn't met the late guy she talking to. I don't even like the president or whatever. He was a new president. And she hadn't even met him before. Like, I'm saying, like, you down the totem pole.
Yeah.
And so like, fundamentally, like, I think that utilizing, like, position and to actually leverage it for the greater group interest is what didn't happen here. And then when it doesn't happen, you don't have a group to back behind you. This is how we want to do it first, like on a professional level. And this is why. Instead of just on a personal level, it's my show. It wasn't your show.
No, she said that too. She said, I love our show and I want it back. There was no hour in that. You were a hired hand, and I think when you understand that, I'm just hired, and because I was just hired, I can be just fired. That's kind of the way it works. Like I'm not invested. I'm not a stock owner in this company. I'm not, I don't own any part of MSNBC. So I can go anytime they tell me to go. Like, we have this idea, and I don't even know where it comes from, that like, because that blackness is just important, and blackness should be respected just because it's black. Like, no, that's not how capitalism works. Like, no, it's all about earnings. And when your potential to create earnings, kind of, goes down, which is what we see in terms of punditry right now, because the black president is gone, and when white people aren't curious anymore about what the black president is thinking or what black people are thinking. There's no longer that curiosity anymore. So when your stock goes down, then your job is in jeopardy. That's just basic stuff.
Yeah, and we'll end up on this, and I kind of feel like, you also have this dynamic that the whole Hillary needs a black vote thing is dying out too.
Yeah.
Like, not saying it won't be important in the national election, but given the issues that the Republicans are having on their side of the play, the big thing was to get her past Bernie without her having to keep saying stuff that was kind of like real far left. And like now looks like it's about to happen with Super Tuesday coming tomorrow. And so like, you're in Georgia, right?
Yeah.
Are you voting tomorrow?
Yeah, I technically, one of the friends like, why are you still registered as a Democrat and you're independent? I'm like, I just want to, wherever I go, I want to make sure I can cast a vote, and
you ain't got nobody on the other side, so
yeah, so it was just like, I gotta make sure, like, I'm not down with them like that, but I want to be able to vote, and so I'll go out on Tuesday, and I'm not telling anybody else to vote. I'm not one of those people who encourages people get out to vote or whatever. I'm just telling you what I'm doing. Everybody knows I ain't voting for Hillary. So
let me ask you just one last question. You can end it out. And so, like, being that this is February 29th, a leap year, we have one more day of Black History Month, and what is your view on like the importance of the vote in context of like Black history?
I mean, honestly, I had a friend say this, and I can't disagree. Honestly, and in terms of Black History Month, and just in terms of voting after South Carolina, I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, I'm not saying that Black people haven't been through. We all know what we've been through, what we've endured. But the question now becomes, what do you do with it? Like, what do you do with that? Like, And to me, like, in terms of where my mind is right now, I think Black History Month, it should be a month, like my friend said, a month of mourning. I mean, I'm just so sick, about like what we don't know and how we don't act and how we don't react. And like, everything we've gone through, like how we give like Hillary Clinton a second chance, given what we know, you know, or what we should know about that. So I'm just at a point where I'm just kind of disappointed. I'm at a point I can't even hide my disappointment anymore.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I mean, always good to talk to you. Just trying to get this set up for a couple of days. I'm gonna try to get it up today. Thank you so much.
No problem. I appreciate it.